So welcome to this event, the Railway Technical Society of Australasia. Hopefully everybody here has heard of us and ideally also members. So, you know, we're Technical Society, both jointly with Engineers Australia and Engineers New Zealand. And so we run under the banner of both. And sort of an organisation for anybody with an interest in railway engineering and related professional matters. So some of the objectives are to stimulate sort of the contribution and participation of members in development and dissemination knowledge, you know, one of the key parts of any technical grouping. Support the business of railway engineering, you know, something that sort of there's nobody else in New Zealand who really is integrated in the way that we are to help sort of support the business. And also then the CPD professional development of members. We've got a number of devices for doing that. Hopefully some of you would have heard of and would have attended our CRL seminar held a couple of months ago now in Auckland. We had a whole day seminar, well attended beyond their expectations of people just coming to hear what's happening with the CRL project. You know, quite an impressive bit of engineering. It's very good day, and that's an example of what we do. Another one just sort of coming up, just use the opportunity to promote that we now are lucky. We've got CORE 2025 in Auckland, CORE being the sort of the primary sort of railway engineering conference in Australasia, held every 2 years, a little bit messy at present because COVID got in the way. So we are hosting that. Last time we in New Zealand hosted it was in Wellington in 2010. And we're now looking at holding it in June 2025. So once all that stuff's confirmed, we'll certainly be out there starting to promote and then get all of the sponsorship, etc. So now just, are we able to move on to the next slide? Right. Probably the ear is probably getting a bit confused with all these Bluetooth devices swapping information and stuff like that. Right. So now, we've moved, there is sort of a number of events we're doing tonight. As you will be aware, that we've got some particularly outstanding professionals to celebrate. And then we've got a presentation by another outstanding engineering professional, Dan, around the Cyclone Gabrielle Recovery. But now I sort of hand over to Murray King, who's going to be the MC for the next stage of the morning, the evening rather. So many of you, or hopefully many of you have heard of Murray. Murray's been, as he says, a career over 50 years. And he's, you know, I keep thinking to myself, that's a big number. But then when I look at what my career is, it's not too far short of that. I think he points out that he's not an engineer, but he's been closely involved with the engineering and railway sector for some time, and probably has been one of the leaders amongst the railway fraternity in New Zealand for that period of time. Sort of recently he's been still involved in helping QRail develop a long-term rail infrastructure plan and you know, the big key issue of decarbonisation strategy. So now just hand over to Murray. Is a chartered civil engineer who commenced working in rail in 1997. He has held a variety of technical, operational, business and managerial roles in an infrastructure with these predominantly in the rail industry. He is the leading professional rail engineer in New Zealand, having positively influenced some of the most significant railway works in this country over the past 25 years. These include developing asset strategies and improving technical capacity of rail engineering in New Zealand. He has also assisted in successful business case preparation, as well as holding significant roles in many award-winning projects, some of which have been recognised internationally, two by the RTSA for the biennial Australasian Project Award. And he's currently KiwiRail's Executive General Manager, Inter-Island Business Readiness, to ensure people, systems, processes, and the commercial aspects of the new operations are ready for the arrival of the new ferries and upgraded portside infrastructure. Next one, Simon. Simon Wood, again, who many of you would know, has provided many years of service in the rail industry since 1978 as a railway engineer in the UK, New Zealand, and Australia. His qualifications include BE UK, Fellow of Engineering New Zealand, MIET and AMIRSE. Simon is currently self-employed. His numerous contributions to RTSA include being past executive chair of the RTSA, being the longest serving committee member of the New Zealand chapter, and former chapter chair, and being a participant of various RTSA subcommittees and core organising groups. Alongside this, Simon has made significant contributions to the New Zealand rail industry, particularly his role in progressing the electrification of the Auckland Metro network, and then the business case for the Auckland City Rail Link.
Right. Now we can get on to the proper job. The format for the evening was for these two people to be asked questions, which I've developed these questions, and because of the pointed nature of some of them, I was forced to run them past them, which so graciously agreed to answer them. That may run for about 20 minutes, and then we'll have a Q&A session from this floor and the other two. So if you could save your questions for then, and if you can't think of any, I've got 3 or 4 pages more. Let's start off with Simon. You've been very active in the RTSA since its inceptions. And what do you think it adds to the rail industry, and what more could it add?
Thanks, Murray. It's an interesting question. I think it's adds a lot to, I guess, the body of knowledge of railway engineering. It's a forum for people like tonight to, I guess, learn more, exchange ideas, get to know people. I think as where it could go, I feel quite strongly now that we have to start taking a more of a advocacy role, a technical advocacy role around what do we think the shape of the rail network should look like, contribute to some of the discussions that are happening around things like regional rail and others with an informed source. Those people that were at the CRL conference will have heard Sean Sweeney from CRL talk about engineers need to get a voice and need to be heard. There's lots of people who have opinions who don't know what they're talking about. So I think that's our challenge to contribute.
And Walter, what do you think it might add, especially for younger technical people?
This is the RTSA. So RTSA, firstly, thanks for having me along tonight, and I'm really honoured and humbled to be part of the RTSA and be recognised, and also like people like Merv, who hired me into the railway industry in the first place, and I worked with so many different rooms. Must be at least 2 or 3 or 4 of my managers over the years are here tonight. So thank you so much. In terms of the RTSA's. Sorry, just repeat the question.
Well, what do you think the RTSA adds to the railway industry, and what more could it add, but from a for younger and technically oriented people? Yeah,
I was at a tourism conference last week and was talking, and so I'll use an analogy. So basically, in the tourism industry, you can't be a solo tourist provider. People want to come to New Zealand, they want to go on a zip line on Waiheke Island, they want to catch a scenic train, they want to go to the Agrodome in Rotorua, they want to catch the Inter-Islander ferry, those types of things. So you can, and engineers are the same, you can't exist in isolation. It's the industry as a whole and how we connect together is where it really matters.
I'm not sure whether I'm allowed to answer my own questions, but one of the problems that I've had in organisations that I've belonged to who want to adopt an advocacy approach is that you very quickly run up against your employer's perspective and it becomes an impossibility. So you'll have to be very careful about that. Now, Simon, your bio refers to you delivering the business case for the City Rail Link. Can you tell us something of the transformative effect it'll have on the CBD in Auckland, and more particularly how you managed to capture that in the business case?
Sure. I guess just to clarify, the business case I was involved in was the initial business case about protecting the route rather than the subsequent one for the money, but that was challenging enough as it was. I guess the transformative effect, as people have seen in the past, is that many more people being able to get into the city faster, in terms of work and pleasure. I think it's already starting to have an effect on the development along that corridor. That was, in terms of real estate development, that was something we recognised in the consortium that I was involved with. The company I worked with at the time, AECOM, had access to a US-based economists who specialised in exactly this sort of analysing the real estate impact of these big projects. So we brought in this guy from the States who did a lot of work. We had a lot of pushback from government at the time who didn't believe it. So I guess I was quite pleased about 4 or 5 years later when the then Prime Minister approved it, largely because all the property developers who really invested were hassling him about getting on with it. So I think it's a city changing project as much as a transport project in my mind.
Thanks. In the bio that was read out before, there was mention of the RTSA recognition of 2 award-winning projects of yours, Walter. What were they and how did they contribute to better rail?
Yeah, so the 2 projects were the Arahura Road Rail Bridge right down near Hokitika, and the second one was the Kaikoura Earthquake Recovery projects. When I was thinking about this, when I was thinking about it, there's some massive similarities between the 2 projects, and that they were both involved a roading aspect and a rail aspect and intensive community involvement. So which was the Arahura went first, and back in the day we did some groundbreaking work with the local iwi there. They actually owned the riverbed, and so we had to come to some special arrangements and really proactively work with the community to make sure it was a successful project. And it was a pretty scary project because it was a crappy old timber truss bridge. It was beautiful, a bridge, if people remember it. It was a single lane road rail bridge, so we had to come up with some really innovative ideas to do that. And then the second project was the Kaikoura Earthquake. Again, it was a multi-agency project and of a huge scale. So it was really exciting to collaborate and work and get a super good outcome. And again, the iwi and mana whenua involvement was just vital in the success of the project, as well as being part of the community as we undertook the project.
Thanks, Walter. Now, here's a question for both of you, and we're going to start with Walter for a change. The introductory words noted that the railway in New Zealand has changed a lot during your respective careers. Can you please talk about a couple of examples that you think are important?
Yeah, well, starting back in the 90s, I literally, when I first started in the industry, we didn't have computers in our workplaces. In fact, I think we only had one computer in our office, and I remember the sort of senior engineers of the day sort of going, "What are you doing on a computer? You should be just there with your calculator and your design paper and doing all those things now." I don't think you'd ever see a design calculator now. It would be all or design paper now. You'd see it all happening inside a computer. But I was sort of just on that cusp of going digital. But I think for me, when the industry first started, it was quite siloed. It was sort of tucked into their own disciplines. Now you're seeing the scale of the projects are increasing, and there's far more integration. And to be successful, you just need to knit all those many things together. That involves hardcore engineering through to systems and assets and safety. So yeah, far more collaboration between the disciplines. And then the other thing that I've observed is there's far more collaboration in how you deliver projects. So big alliances or alliance type work, relationship ECI type contracts are more the norm now. And I think you get better outcomes by that collaboration.
Simon?
Yeah, I guess my time goes a bit further back into the 80s. I guess in that period, at that time when I joined the railways, it was largely an organisation that pretty much delivered everything itself. Large, in terms of its staff, I think we had 20,000 people working for the railways at that point. Everything up, for example, in the signalling engineering side, we built all our own equipment, even down to the carpenters who built the cases for the equipment to go in. So, and the task the railways had at the time was a lot different. They were still on the edges of the period where there was limits on how far trucking could compete. So it was quite a transformation. I think now when you look at not only it's a smaller organisation, there's far more organisations involved in rail, both in terms of contractors and things, but also people like Auckland Transport and Greater Wellington. So I guess we've had to change, along with a lot of other parts of the industry in New Zealand. So it's probably been for the best overall, but it's certainly quite a different organisation.
Can I expand on that and ask, this half a century you've spent working on railways, what is it that has kept you wanting to work on rail, other than the obvious excitement and money?
Yeah, and just to clarify, he's rounding, talking about rounding things up. I think I counted as 45 years, but we won't argue about that. But I think I've just been lucky. I think I got a good grounding when I got into rail. I was a cadet, one of the last cadets for engineering cadets for the railways. I then got wanderlust and wandered off to Europe for 10, 15 years. I think I was just lucky when I got there. There were opportunities that I could do things, and interesting. I have a low boredom threshold, and so being able to look at new things and new ideas. I was lucky when I came back to New Zealand and got involved in slightly out of signal engineering into sort of planning and projects. So there's always been enough interest in the complexity of rail and all the bits and moving it is what I like, and putting all the pieces together.
And Walter, perhaps we could ask you the same question from your quarter of a century perspective. But let's make it look forward. What will keep you in the industry in the future?
Yeah, I know. I just think it's a great industry to be in because, and what I really enjoy about it is events like this, and I guess railways has a sense of purpose that presents lots of opportunities, and I guess some of those are the decarbonising our transport systems, getting freight and other passenger vehicles off roads and things like that. So. And taking that more to a business perspective, like how can we actually help New Zealand's economy by contributing to it in a really positive way? Because railways use less energy, they're cheaper to build than massive motorways. The cost of congestion on roads is huge. So I think trying to unlock those opportunities, and I think we've got some great stories to tell. They're really, really hard stories to tell and convince people. But I think if I can look backwards briefly, I think we've done bloody well as a profession to actually keep the lights on at times in railways. So there were times where it was literally on death's door, but to see things like the metro areas come back, some of those major freight routes just pumping, I think it's really exciting. We should draw some inspiration of that and go forward.
Now, in a different tack, a question for both of you. The industry has increased diversity and inclusiveness recently and is inspiring to go way further in this space. What are the opportunities this direction opens up? Perhaps you could start, Walter.
Oh, look, I'm really passionate about diversity and inclusiveness, both in terms of wahine in the workforce and also different cultures. I think first and foremost, anyone who's tried to hire anyone recently is really, really difficult to get people. So by having a wider view of who your prospective employees can be, then it just opens up new territory. So I just think the diversity of thought that comes in, and also hiring people that represent our customers at the end of the day, means that as we're doing the designs and developing these projects, I think it's just vital. So yeah, I'm pleased to say that I've hired lots of multicultural people and worked with people like Zoe over there, and I see Nikki Sweetman down in Christchurch. So it's just fantastic to have these really awesome females in the industry, and we've got to support them. They are the minority, and I'd like to see more people involved.
Simon?
I think the cite another perspective on that the opportunity that bringing people from other cultures or outside the industry into the industry is, how can we leverage their knowledge and experience. Just an example, we've now got a lot of Brazilian railway engineers working in Kiwi Rail, which is great. there's a lot we can learn. I think we've got to find the right way of engaging. I guess it's like the challenge for the RTSA to be able to start reaching out into the broader community of railway people that are now working in New Zealand, whether it's temporarily or long term, as well as people from other industries, So that's the exciting bit. Learn from what they can contribute, as well as helping them adjust to New Zealand.
Now, Simon, you led the development of the business case for electrification in Auckland. With the growing need to decarbonise, where would you electrify next?
Do I get it? Do I get a prize if I don't get it right? Look, I think one of the things I learned from that exercise and doing it in Auckland, which was again making the case to buy electric trains, was there's a certain critical mass about the number of services and the kilometrage you run a year that you have to do to where the savings of running electric trains offset the cost of the infrastructure. So when you look at it from that lens, it becomes fairly obvious that the next cabs off the rank are the upper North Island and completing the North Island main trunk. I know Murray and others have been doing a lot of work about where that is and is there spaces for discontinuous electrification. But I think doing the ECMT is probably would be a major step towards that goal.
What about you, Walter? What would your answer to that be?
I definitely agree with upper North Island. Like one of the busiest freight routes is from Auckland down to Tauranga. So if you want to bang for buck in terms of carbon per tonne kilometre reduction, that would be a route that you'd hit first. I also look at some of the metropolitan areas like around Wellington, pushing further north on the main North Line. I know there's ideas and options for the Wairarapa line as well, but yeah, I think that's useful. It's also exciting to hear about some of that technology where trains can run distances on their own alternative fuel sources. So I think while New Zealand's maybe not going to be an early adopter necessarily, we should keep a close eye on that technology and see where it goes. And
how much contribution will the new ferry's battery propulsion make to decarbonising transport?
So our new ferries are going to be diesel hybrid electric ferries. Will have battery pack on them, and they'll also plug into the shore power. So the current forecast is that they'll have a 40% reduction in carbon compared to our existing fleet. So in terms of one big project, doing a huge step change, and it's really impressive. And if you didn't know this, ships are incredibly dirty machines. Like they burn a crap ton of fuel, even crossing Crook Strait. You know, so it's gonna make a big difference. It's getting a bit of feedback. But I think it goes more exciting. It gets more exciting in the future because the ships that we're getting have been future-proof for even more batteries, or it's basically a big electric grid. So if another form of power came along, we could do a midlife change out of some of the energies and fuel sources and reduce our carbon even further.
It's a great pity I wasn't able to persuade you of the merits of putting a flat in the rotor and to get another 10%. Now I think we're probably time to have a few questions from the floor.
And also we remember our
yes. I was
now.
Hi everybody, I'm Don from Navarre. I have a question for Walter. What role do you see hydrogen as an energy source for either trains or ferries in the future?
When we looked at fuel sources for the ferries that we've ended up ordering, it comes down to not just the technology to run a ship on hydrogen, it's the fuel supply chains. So you need a really reliable fuel supply chain. So even though it would have been fantastic to go for a hydrogen option, there's just no supply chain of hydrogen in New Zealand yet. But that could change. So I think it's really exciting, and it'll probably need a big beachhead project like a railway or a ship project or some other development that would be the clincher that then suddenly tips the balance into creating a supply chain.
Are you enabling the ships for on-board charging or use of power at port?
Yep, so when the ships are in port, they'll be plugged in, and it's interesting. And we're going to have this challenge in other parts of the electrical national grid system, is that the amount of power that you can suck out of the national grid becomes the limiting factor, not the ships themselves. So I think that they're going to be challenges like that that come up, like down in Picton, for example. The grid, we need to build a new grid exit point to, get enough power in there. But it's the right thing to do. It's a complex job, but when the ship's in port, there'll be no emissions. It'll be running fully offshore power. And for the locals and the community, it means there won't be the fumes of the ship building up in those valley systems and things like that. So it's game changer material. Yeah, when the ships comes in, the lights will go. Yeah.
Any other questions from here in Wellington? If we'll then go to Christchurch, but we're one question or two questions. We'll take these two questions, then we'll go to you in Christchurch.
Rightio, this is probably one for any of you, but do you see a role for, it's probably an unpopular question, but do you see a role for electric trucks in the future?
I think rail is always going to need access to trucks, one where they own it, otherwise to do the last mile work. So, and given the sort of amount of diesel that we burn in New Zealand and road freight, then I think electric trucks probably for the short haul are inevitable. Whether the technology improves fast enough that they become the line haul trucks become viable to electric, I guess that's the challenge for us in rail, that some of our environmental advantage starts to go away. So I guess that's how fast can we keep up with those technology changes in other modes will be the challenge for us.
We'll just take this last question from Wellington.
You talked about hybrids, but what's the other technological advantages, things you see in the future that will change the industry, like computers did back in your day?
I think so the opportunities from digital communications, whether that's in signalling or better customer services and whatever, without even going anywhere near like artificial intelligence, is the opportunity for us to grasp work involved in that. When you've put in a decent digital radio system, there's a lot of stuff that you can use it for. So I think it's just finding the case to make that investment in those backbones, and then people will think of clever ways to do things, whether it's maintaining, monitoring assets or better customer service. So I think that's, everybody uses the word digital, but that really is something we have to get a head round as a railway, I think.
Walter, do you have something to say there? I'm sure you have.
Yeah, Simon briefly mentioned it, but it's around the customer. So like I look at, say, KiwiRail and a lot of systems that the regional councils provide in the metro systems with their ticketing and things like that. There's just huge opportunity there to make railways more accessible and easier to use. And we can maybe develop better pricing systems and accessibility and linking into other systems, so it's more seamless across networks. Because I definitely think, and it goes back to the truck question as well, we're just one part of a transport system. So systems are complex, and if we can use technology to really link ourselves up in a really effective and efficient way, I think that's there's some exciting opportunities there.
Thanks, Walter. Now we'll just hand over to Christchurch. For those of you online, if you've got questions, put them in the chat, and then we'll do the chat questions between Christchurch and Auckland. So Christchurch, hand over to you now for the questions you've got.
We've got Murray Fletcher from Becca has a question.
I'm not sure if you can see me or hopefully you can hear me, but Walter and Simon, great presentation. So in New Zealand, we've got Metro in Auckland and Wellington. Christchurch is the next, or maybe it'll be beyond Hamilton, the next largest metro area. What's your views on the future of metro rail in Christchurch, maybe up to Rangiora, down to Ralston and even possibly back to Littleton.
Want me to do it?
Yep.
Wow, sounds like a fantastic idea. But I think we've got to go on with our eyes wide open. So firstly, and I'm channeling Dave Gordon there. Kiwi Rail is not funded for running these regional rails. I think if the community really wants them, then Kiwi Rail is more than happy to be a partner and party to help stand that up. But I think we should go on with our eyes wide open. I remember doing a study of Metro Rail in Christchurch, and it was a big eye opener. People, they just think, oh, we'll just dial up a few trains and off you go. By the time you get train sets and then enough staff and enough train sets to provide a decent timetable, not just sort of one service a day or just in the morning, it's a big commitment. So I think yes, I think it probably will happen, but we've got to come up with the mechanisms to make it work, and that have to be the patronage and the incentives to use those services. But yeah, I think it would be a big undertaking, and it'd be great if we could do it.
I think perhaps if I could just add to that, it also needs a strong local political champion. If you look what happened in Auckland 20 odd years ago, well, there were some seeds that started with Britomart opening and a few things. It really took people like Mike Lee, who was the then chair of the regional council, to really push it and be politically connected. I'm not that familiar with Christchurch, but my perception is that there hasn't been that strong local push for it at a political level that is get willingness to do it. So Walter's entirely right. It's not the idea of just turning up as a pop-up train service really doesn't unfortunately work. I suspect even things they did in Auckland 20 years ago, we wouldn't be able to do these days. So it is a big commitment, and just finding a sweet spot that you can get something going and create motivation will be the challenge. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. You burst our bubble, by the sounds of it.
Sad faces in the room. Thank you.
I will have one. I was just going to ask before, and I think it was asked before. Listening, trying to bring together a couple of themes. Listening on the radio this morning when a certain political party currently not in power, proposing to do big 4-line sort of motorway on the basis that electric vehicles need to use road, and so therefore you need the best roads. And then and some of the other things is around and there's pluses and minuses to the discussion, the role of an organisation such as the RTSA in actually bringing a few facts to bear on that particular exercise. I know, Simon, you commented upon that, but either of you two, have you got a comment to make?
About the specific issue or the general role around?
Well, the general role, yeah.
I think that's one of the advantages the RTSA has now being part of Engineering New Zealand and Engineers Australia, but in New Zealand, that I think there is the forum now through Engineering New Zealand that, and like sometimes if there are things that we felt we could start to, I don't think engage in political debate, but start to around making some of those issues. What is a technical strategy for the road? What does the ideal railway in New Zealand start to look like in the future in terms of that may or may not be the same as what meets Kiwi Rail's businesses, but looking at it from a national perspective, are we? There's a lot of talk about high-speed rail, but we probably all realise around that that's fairly challenging for society. But what is possible? What's the sort of freight task we should be aiming at? And I think I haven't quite worked through how we with Engineering New Zealand could start to promote some of those things. But I think that's the challenge to be able to, when other people are making the case for things like passenger rail, being able to say, you've got a vision, here's some of the things we have to do, that have to happen to make it, to realise it and getting a place at the table. So I think that's a challenge. I haven't quite figured out how we best do it, but if we're to be relevant, I feel that's how we need to get involved in that area.
Well, have you?
Oh, maybe I'll just echo something that I said earlier about, it's railways as part of a system. So if the 4-lane highway complemented railway in some way, then I'm not sure the specifics of this particular case, then then that'd be great. But I think you just look at, say, Auckland. If you took the railway now, like a counterfactual, Auckland would just grind to a halt without with roads only. So rail has got a role to play in certain communities. It's how to maybe get ahead of the game, because we're so good at just leaving things for the last minute. So it's bloody hard to build, or you have to cause massive disruption to build it. So that's the opportunity. So go, right, yep, build your 4-lane highway, but you're still going to need this, this and this, future-proof it along the way.
Yep.
And certainly that's something that Kiwi-Rail, the railway industry, has been good at. Like I remember when they did the Mackay's Crossing overpass, and we insisted that they provide space on the overbridge for double tracks and an access road, which was just outrageous at the time. But my goodness, it's paying off now. And like, you just couldn't dream not having 2 tracks, let alone an access road, so you can maintain it in a really efficient way.
Thanks, Walter. Now, Auckland, you ready? I see a little bit of frantic activity up here tonight. What is the role the RTSA have in promoting the projects like Auckland One Rail?
Is it light rail? Light rail.
Right,
That makes me sense. I think that's probably a segue from the my previous point is I don't think we're necessarily into the merits of promoting a particular project, but perhaps informing people around some of the decisions around and assumptions around light rail and choices may be useful. There's lots of variants of light rails, and they've all got a place. One of the things, I guess, is understanding what's the transport task that's being done for it. So I don't see we're going to necessarily be a cheerleader for this project or that project, but if we can help the debate.
Walter?
I'm not really an expert in this field, but I'll make something up if you like. I'm going to do a bit of a plug for heavy rail, because I think we've already got it there. What are the opportunities that we can extend that? So I know that we've sort of explored some routes, alternative routes out to the airport, for example, building off the current lines. So they may be some options there. And I think, like the City Rail Link project, the light rail's got to have some benefits. It's going to cause massive amounts of disruption to build it. But if it's going to unlock potential that's not there, then I think it's just having the right vision and evidence behind that to sell the project. But having looked at some of the light rail projects being built overseas, they're not actually rail building projects, they're service relocation and causing massive roadworks and other bits and pieces. So we should be really clear about what it's not a rail project. It's achieving all these other things as well.
And Murray, you've been sitting there silently, but many of these questions I'm sure that you've had an answer for as well, and very informed answer. Have you got any comments you want to make before we sort of move to the next stage around some of the questions that have been asked?
Well, sure.
Yes.
Well, no, I'm generally enjoined by people who hire me to keep my mouth shut. So it's a difficult question, though. I agree entirely with Walter that I think Auckland light rail is a solution looking for a problem. If you want to get to the airport, you start at Puanui and go 2 kilometres and you're there.
Thank you. We just one last question. We've now got another one online from anonymous attendee. Is there any future for high-speed rail in New Zealand, brackets, reducing time to commute? Does anonymous attendee able to clarify what the reducing time to commute means? Are you talking about just reducing Hamilton to Auckland is anonymous attendee's response.
And I think this is this definition of, rather than the speed, is what is the journey time you're trying to achieve. We had a speaker out, spoke to the RTSA a few years ago, Andrew McNaughton from the UK, and he was very much into his ideas of the 20-minute city and the 2-hour journeys between regional centres. It doesn't necessarily have to be high speed in terms of hundreds of kilometres an hour. I don't think we've got the population. I think there was a study done a year or two ago that came up with $8 billion to build a 200-kilometre-an-hour railway between Auckland and Hamilton. I'm not sure that we've got that population to support that sort of thing. So I think it's define the problem, look at what's the right mix of solutions. Even I think to get to 160 kilometres an hour in our current alignment will be a major ask, not just from the geometry of keeping trains on the track, but all the level crossings and everything else. So they are major undertakings. So again, understand the benefits. I think that is be important.
Yeah, like if the question was say Auckland to Wellington, that would be a really big ask given how hilly and windy that route is, and it would be quite a massive exercise to get a route straightened up. I think Auckland to Hamilton, yeah, I'm with Simon. There'd have to be a reason for it or a justification, and given that we've got Tahuia in its early days, we should be looking at ways to make that as reliable and fast and frequent as we can. And then that's the way you grow. And then I guess it would get to a tipping point where you go, oh, cripes, yeah, high speed rail, it's all on, let's go. So I think, yeah, let's start with what we've got, make that awesome, and then go from there.
Thanks, Walter, and I'd like to thank the three panelists for their contribution. Thank you, Murray, for being the chair, even though with your one eye, sort of some of your have been biased. Now, unfortunately, due to a slight oversight, this bag that I've got contains 2 bottles, but in fact, we've got 3 people in the chair. So by process of elimination, anybody here don't drink beer? No. So what I'll do, because I'm probably more likely to see Simon recently, I will hand out one to Murray first.
Yep.
And then to Walter, and then we'll get Simon's
buy me a
one.
beer
And,
later.
so it's an IO for the beer. So thank you for your contributions. As to the awards that Walter and Simon are receiving, they were officially handed over at CORE conference this year. I have a special gift, however, which is in lieu for Simon. And I'm not going to open it up because I'm not superstitious, but just in case. Sort of, and that's
Thank you.
in lieu of some of your things. So thank you. You're welcome to open it up.
That's bad luck.
Well, thank you. Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Right. All right. Into the next stage of the evening's presentation, and sort of I've got a CV from for Daniel, which I'll read out shortly. But of course, all right, yeah, the short CV is really sort of have a natural disaster, call Dan. So the fuller CV is Dan is program director in KiwiRail in the construction delivery team. He's currently leading the Hawke's Bay Cyclone Recovery for KiwiRail to reopen the Palmerston North Gisborne line. I always like the fact that Gisborne's still mentioned in the PNGL, but that we're talking about the section to Napier. He's also KiwiRail's owner interface manager for the Transport Rebuild East Coast Alliance. There needs to be an acronym created for that particular one. That is tasked with undertaking the work required on the Napier to Wairoa section of the PNGL and additional recovery work south of Napier. He's held various roles in KiwiRail in the past, including as a professional head and operational manager of the Taranaki and Hawke's Bay areas, and as a project manager, including a secondment to the management team of the North Canterbury Transport Infrastructure Recovery NECTA Alliance, responsible for the road and rail rebuild after Kaikoura earthquake. He's currently the current chair of the RTSA chapter. Now, that paragraph, I think, has got only 2 full stops in it. Should have added, but Dan, hand over to you. Yeah, you're going to need that.
Tēnā koutou e homa no karanima aho. Hi ka mahi aho ki ngā rerewe o Aotearoa I noho ana aho ki Waikanae. Ko Daniel Hedefin toka ingawa. No reira tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. So something I just said there, I live in Waikanae now, up in Kapiti Coast, but I'm from Hawke's Bay. So that's where I grew up, and I am chair of RTSA, but I'm here tonight presenting as an employee of Gabrielle. So yeah, Hawke's Bay to me is home. I was actually in Dunedin for the cyclone, and went up to a little place called Porongahau, which is southern Hawke's Bay, where my mother-in-law has a place, and helping her after the cyclone dig out her garage and dig out the woodshed, and having the experience of breakfasts and meals at the rugby club and showers at someone's farm, just because Porongahau was massively hard hit. And then I got the call from Paul Ashton and the Gabrielle infrastructure team a couple of days later to see if I could go to Ahuiri to help out there. And so been involved with the cyclone recovery up in Hawke's Bay since about a week after. It was on the 14th of February. So this presentation, going to go through a bit of what is the damage, give a bit of a context, and then there's some specific things that we're doing in different parts, and some of the work that's underway right now, and some of the things that might be coming up. And I realized when someone asked me at the start, do you have a notes thing, that I thought, no, I haven't written any notes. So let's just see how I go for remembering what each slide is meant to be. Yeah, so just got mentioned, it's the Palmerston North Gisborne line. So we actually split it up for the recovery into 3 sections. There's Hastings South, so south as far as you want, but all the way to Palmy North, and that's you can read the kilometrages there. Then Hastings to Napier, much shorter distance, and this is in part as to how the damage has actually affected the rail and how we're operating right now. Napier to Wairau, so that's a pretty significant track length, and then Wairau to Gisborne, but I'll say that's a mothballed section at the moment. So not going to talk about Wairau to Gisborne much other than right now that we have what's called a duty of care, with it being a mothballed line, as to how do we make sure that we don't have any damage from neighbour properties into the line that detrimentally affect us, but more so, how do we make sure that we don't detrimentally affect our neighbours, particularly there's lots of farms and such, but there's some roads, New Haka up to Mahia and such, that local communities rely on those. So you're going through these sections now. Woodville to Hastings, so there wasn't much in the way of damage through the Manawatu Gorge. Generally it started at Woodville, and that piece, it's over 100 damage sites, or in the order of 100 damage sites that we had south of Hastings. But like I note here, there's only the one major damage site. In the terms minor, moderate, major, extreme, they're going to get explained in a bit, but only the one major site, and that's Bridge 176. So that's, you can see the section on the photo there between Bridge 176, which is a road under rail, and that got washed out between that and Bridge 175, which goes over the Waipawa River. So what I think of as Central Hawke's Bay, and when you're driving over the Waipawa, you'll see the rail just before you get to the BP. So that was all completely washed out, reasonable big section. And that was a critical path for reopening to Hastings, which we have done. So we reopened to Hastings start of April. And we set up a road bridging site in Hastings to take freight to Napier. There's still a bit of work that remains south of Hastings. It's in the order of several $1 million. It's not several tens of millions for doing the damage repairs, but it's in the moderate to minor with things around it at the moment. That means we can safely run trains. Cool. Now moving Hastings to Napier. There were a small number of damaged sites where ballast has been washed out between Whakatu and Timona. They've all been repaired really quick, but the big sites, it's the one in the picture here, Bridge 217. I'm going to talk quite a bit about this one in a bit, so I won't go into too much detail now. But that's the whole reason that we're not open to Napier. And timeframes for getting open to that. Yeah, it says multiple months here. Next month, it was multiple months when it happened, but yeah, we're planning to be open next month. And it's United Civil is our contractor. See Don from Navara here and Mark from Oricon. They've had people involved in the design teams from that for that too. Then we get into the real big stuff. So between Napier and Wairoa, and 116 kilometres of track, some of it's pretty challenging even before the cyclone. So we split it here into 3 sections. So I'll talk about those in a bit more detail. And just it's sometimes people use some of these terms interchangeably, but in Hawke's Bay, Estdale is generally an area that people know. East River is the separate piece, and then Tutera to Kaihika. So I'll go into those specifically in a bit more detail now. Oh, but I'll just add, that's Bridge 222, that's the Esk River Bridge. I think that was renewed in the 1938 floods that came through Esk. And it's a reasonable sized truss. And we're out there with one of the contractors getting involved in the alliance. And he said, is that your biggest bridge on the line? I think I said, bro, it's not even in the top 10 for this piece of the line. So we've got a reasonable number of viaducts, in the order of 10 or so on the PNGL. We've got the biggest viaduct in the Southern Hemisphere. That's the mighty Mohaka Viaduct, 98 metres high. And I can't remember if it's 300 metres long, but she's pretty significant. Then you've got Ormondville, Kopua, south of Hastings. You've got Waiheke and a couple of others. I just forgotten names right now. You've got some massive structures north of Napier. So yeah, it's a big bridge, but not for Napier Wairoa standard. So the first area, Estdale. So as you're coming out of Napier, for those used to driving it, you go north, you go through Bayview on State Highway 2, and then you take the turn off to Taupo, and you're following State Highway 5. The rail takes that same bend, and we go through Estdale. It's about 7 kilometres long, and we are really close to Estdale in some parts, and we're 100 or so metres apart from State Highway 5 and others. And we class that whole area as an extreme damage site. So a bit of a picture there of one of our guys, Taff, cutting some rail. I'll go into this in a bunch more detail so you can see, but yeah, the entire rail has either been buried in a couple of metres of silt or been washed out there. And there is one bridge up at Munns Creek that's got a bit of damage to it. Esk River Valley. So as you're going to Napier on the State Highway 5, you'll leave the railway, and the railway goes up the Esk River, keeps going up the valley. And it's in a situation a bit like this. For the civil engineers, we call it a sidling cut. So, and this is where it's not going to be so good for those online. Yeah, that's Alice Wallace Road, a local road. Didn't actually have a bridge connecting it before the cyclone. It had just a ford. So it's not a particularly heavily used road. And there's the rail underneath. And that's the Esk River down below. So pretty limited room, and lots of notes there about how the track sections are broken up with damage. But we've got about 8 Ks. We've got a local road above us, and then we've got nothing until you get a little place called Waikowai, and then you've got another local road. So it's just native bush or forestry and maybe some forestry tracks. But for a lot of it, it's just the railway. Access is a big problem then. You've got reasonable number of tunnels. I think there's 3, 4 through there, and at least one other big, not enormous viaduct, but big bridge. And just the last point I'll say here, we've inspected all of this area, and this one was pretty full on. So this was lots of flying people in helicopters and dropping them off for the day, and then they walked to get to all the sites. Reasonable amount of use of UAVs, bit of local road, and again, lots of walking. So as you get to Waikowai and then to Tutera, people generally know Tutera, Lake Tutera, the song, won't try and repeat it, that's where it's from. You've got one massive damage site, the biggest on the whole line, that's the picture there. But it starts getting less. So that's Tutera to Kaihika. But the other point here is we are closer to State Highway 2 once you get to Tutera. We're not always in sight. So I get asked this lots, the difference between this massive disaster in Kaikoura, we were within sight of State Highway 1 for most of the biggest areas, not all the way, not to Conway, not where Amuri and the Hundalis, but here we are close, but not tight with State Highway 2 to Terra running north. But this damage site I'm showing, it was a 1.5 by 2 meter arch culvert. It's an arch because it's built probably around the 30s, about 15 meters deep, and farmland on either side, possibly a couple of ponds that blew out, and it's blown out. And so it's 15 meters deep embankment washout and about 55 meters long. So that's the biggest embankment washout on the line. And again, to go and inspect was pretty challenging, but we actually, for this section, we brought high rails down from Bay of Plenty, because those that know how to get to Tuterra, you go through Devil's Elbow and Tangoyo and such, and that was all cut off massively. But we could bring high rails down from Bay of Plenty, and at the Portorino over the Waikari Gorge, our bridge was open, our viaduct was open, but State Highway 2 is completely washed out. So we're bringing high rails through, we're talking to locals and Wakikotahi about them using it for access and such while they were getting the Bailey Bridge back online. Never really panned out that they needed to use it, but we had high rails stored at a farm for people to use if there was a need, as well as our teams. Then you go Kahika to Wairoa, and don't want to sound blasé about it, but a bit more like any major storm incident. So there's 7 kilometres so section with no damage, and then there's a few minor moderate ones, but it is nowhere near to the scale once you get north of Kahika. So what have we been doing? So that's the damage. Like I said, we've opened to Hastings, and that's Bridge 176. This one that's been repaired, abutments all rebuilt, and that job's finished. But we do have, like I said, quite a few other jobs. This is, I can't remember which viaduct this is. I don't think it's Kopua, but reasonable bit of scour, slips around some of our big viaducts, quite a few drainage channels and such that they need a bit of work in small scale slope works. But it is a scale less than what's north of Hastings. So what's north of Hastings? Going to concentrate on this area, and probably gone a bit heavy with the slides, but I find it just a fascinating area. So before and after. Before is green, after is brown with all of the silt. And look, I'm just going to point up here. This is Bridge 217. This is Bridge 216, PNGL, and State Highway 51, the old State Highway 5, State Highway 2, sorry. But I'll skip to, and Narororo River, Tutaikuri River, Waitangi Stream. But hopefully this one, and this is again some before and afters, I'll just talk through the whole, some of the history of the rivers. So the railway built here in 1870 between Napier and Hastings, moving south, trying to get down to Palmerston North, wasn't heading north at that point. The northern piece comes in the 1920s, 1930s, and goes over the Waitangi Stream at the time. And there's a few rivers around there. It's not till 1897 that we have a bridge there. And we have a bridge there because there's a massive storm, big flooding, and the Narororo floods, and 12 people are killed at Clive. And the railway is washed out at Waitangi. And so the bridge that's built in 1897 is called the Waitangi Washout Bridge. And I said to Murray, I might mention this, I met a guy when I was reasonably young, growing up in Hawke's Bay, who had been in the storm, lived at Farndon, which is at Clive. And when I said that to Murray, he said, oh, well, my grandmother was on the bridge at Clive because he's got family from that area. And so you think 1897 is a long time ago, but you meet people that live through it, or you have family that live through it. So it's not that long ago. Right, so 1897, we built a bridge. 1931, you have the Hawke's Bay earthquake, kills about 89 people in Hastings and over 100 in Napier. Massive uplift. And it causes problems with the rivers, massive problems in Esk, but also around here. So before the earthquake, the Tutaikuri this river. This used to run up into Napier, and there was plans in the 20s to try and divert it down here. And that all gets prompted by the uplift of the Napier earthquake. And so road, rail, and the equivalent of catchment boards and the councils all get together and rebuild both the road and rail bridge to create the new Waitangi State Highway Bridge and the new Waitangi Rail Bridge. They get finished in 1936. Then in the 1960s, the Narororo here, that used to go through Clive. And so this is the Clive River, actually links to the Karamu stream. This piece gets diverted to link in and go out where the Tutaikeri is. And the Tutaikeri gets pushed south to go out under these bridges. And so both the rail and road bridges get rebuilt then in the 1960s, and all the stop banks get massively changed through this area. And I like saying this story because we've got some problems now that not just for rail to solve. Rail shouldn't try and solve them alone. So that's Awatoto up the top, the Maraenui golf course. You can just see past a bit of water there. So what's happened is massive amount of water, massive amount of debris has backed up across the Waitangi Bridge and washed it out. And it's protected State Highway 51, but while it's been getting damaged, the stop banks at Awatoto have completely gone. And the Tutaikeri has had three road bridges, wash out further upstream, and it overtopped its banks in quite a few places. 2 people were drowned around the Tutaikeri. And the Narororo, which is not in this photo, it's overtopped its banks. It didn't fail, it's overtopped and it's flooded too. But just check out that area. And maybe I'll go back one, haven't practiced this. Just this massive area here, I measured it, that's 3 kilometers that the water has gone where there was no water before, just a little stream. It's gone 3 kilometers all through Ravensdown, all through the tannery, the animal processing plant. It's got right to the golf course, and it became a massive contaminated hazard zone. When we were going in there, you had to wear the hazmat suits and they'd wash your vehicle down before you left because of all of the contaminants there. And that water sat for months afterwards. I think it might mostly have drained out now. So it needs a whole of Hawke's Bay approach. It needs all the agencies working together, because Takawhai, that got hit by both the Narororo and the Tutaikeri coming through. What are we going to do about all of these rivers and such? And just building the rail bridge back where it was, that's not going to really address any future problems. But we need to get open. So what have we done? We've done some temporary works to reopen our bridge. So we keep lots of spare rail spans, call them spare spans. And a really common length in rail is 40 foot, 12.19 meters, because that was just the lengths that were getting built when we built most of our rail. And so we've got 6 of our 40-foot spans, because 5 40-foot spans here got washed out. There's one, there's another, and we think the other 3 are in the Pacific. We've actually done a bathymetric survey of all of this and haven't found any trace of them around here, so we think they've washed all the way through. So we've taken 6 spans and we've cut one of them in half, and that's to create an offset of the existing piers. So 3 piers completely washed out and these couple are damaged, so we've offset from those and placing the 40 footers. And so that's United Civil, and they've been working with Subbies, Hawke's Bay Civil Construction, Spiral Drillers, Eastbridge. Lots of people know them in Pandora and Napier. And like I say, Navarre, Oricon, and a few others. Sorry if I'm forgetting some. And this is how it's going. So there's the progression of works. They've got a really cool process of staging and working from both banks. And there's them doing some concreting of the cap and concreting over there, putting the cap in and lowering the span. And you can see it's a reasonable stretch of water that they're working over. So it does have its challenges. And here's the schematic. They were working from the north, from the south, working north with staging. Another crane on the north bank just to get it quicker. That's where we were about 3 weeks ago. We've got 3 spans in now. So it probably looks a bit like this out on site at the moment, and they'll be working their way back. Yeah, so that's we're aiming to open at a point to be confirmed in September. Now, next big site I'll go through is Estale. So Estale is pretty full on. That's Pete Marsh, our ganger, works between Napier and Wairua. So he's at a patch we call the Strawberry Field. All 3 of these pictures are. And just this one here, see the railway line there, but there's the railway line as well up there. So one of those places it wasn't at before. This one, the car, that obviously wasn't there before either. So the rail's just been massively pushed around, and I've got to, trying to give context to that is quite hard. It really helps to walk the area, but obviously can't do that with yourself. So again, before and after. So Estale was really nice before. There's a motor camp. There's a famous church where I've been to weddings. Lots of wineries. Lots of people, a few friends that used to live there and such. And they used to because their houses are gone. There was a boarding school up by the Estale word as well. And so what's happened, the brown is where all the silts come down, and that's been in places up to 2 meters. I forget the stat, but it's several millions cubic meters worth of silt's been deposited through here and pretty much destroyed the railway line. And so to try and just give a bit of a sense of the energy it must have carried, that's the railway line, the red line at the top. That's some of the railway track. So it managed to get between this guy's place, met him a few times. So he's obviously, pretty devastated by the damage to his entire bit of land. But there's another bit. And it came down and it's bent in half, and it's managed to get a car impaled through it. And you just think, boy, the strength of that, because rail's not that light. And it's hundreds of meters of it that's been carried. Another thing that there's a few vehicles. This was all orchards and vineyards, and so thousands and thousands of posts. And you now go out to places and you can't recognise in any landmarks. And so I was standing with a guy further down, the guy that owns the motor camp, and we're on top of what felt like a World War I barbed wire barricade, because it was all of the posts and all of the wire curled up, and that got dumped on his property. So he's thinking, what am I going to do about this? But he's looking at his land that is like this. So it's all zones not fit for residential use, but it was people's livelihoods of orchards and other things. Right, we're moving north. So going up the East River, and we've got an old loop at Waipanga, and then there's a I think it was an old mill town at a place called Waikawai. And these are actually 2 different sites, but we've got about 6 like this. So that's what the damage is, massive embankment blowouts. They're not quite as big as the one I talked you through before, but they're getting into 10 to 15 meters high, and some of them sort of around the 40 meters long. So that's quite a different type of damage than what we had in Kaikoura, where we had massive big slips. So they're now going into a bit more of the recovery. So what are we doing north of Napier? It's been a huge exercise in planning and damage assessment. So I mentioned the moderate major sites. We've got a way of classifying them that we started doing in Kaikoura. We actually started doing into 2014 Manawatu floods, and we've been progressing that and using mobile apps and such. So using our Survey 123 was the software we used this time, and we compiled a huge amount of data. But I will just sort of lifting behind the curtain a bit, it didn't go that well at first, because you thought we'd just grabbed all the stuff that we did in Kaikoura, but you got different people involved. We've got different IT systems and such. So some of the software licenses that we had in Kaikoura, we no longer had. And some of the people that started getting involved straight after, they went down in Cheviot, they went down in Blenheim and such to do it. So they just responded as they had last time. And so we had a bit of rework for a couple of weeks to get everyone singing from the same song sheet using these, using the mobile devices. What's the software you can use? And it was actually some of our consultants going, well, this is what is available to everyone. So we can all use this. And we had Stantec, Oricon, TNT, someone else I've just forgotten, WSP, Homes, Navaria, and so it's all of them, what can they use? And so Survey 123 was the common one that's been used. And boy, it took off. So I led the Kaikoura work, and we did probably half the level of assessments and twice the time. In the detail, with 800 inspections, 600 reports, 400 damage concepts created out of this, that was just compiled massively quick once we got this going, because Kiral's hugely invested in digital tools and digital technology, and some of those weren't used here, but you've got a bunch of people that know how to develop things really quickly. And so they're given a problem and they'll look at it from a different perspective of rolling it out with digital devices. And so they did that really quick. And enabled it all to be on GIS. So I was going through Waka Kotahi's damaged GIS database today, or mapping, and it's exactly the same. There's a couple of differences in colouring and such, but they use the same Survey 123 reports, and they're actually using the same 4 criteria, because I'd had a bit of a look what we're doing and went, yeah, hey, that's going to work for us. So they're trying to standardise to that. But just like Waka Kotahi does, they've got a bunch more grunt behind it, and I've seen some of the stuff they're doing. It adds to this, and so that's something I'm quite excited about, that we're working with their team as to, can we create a process for land transport incident responses together, and they're open to it. And yeah, I just hope Kiral are as well. Other digital stuff, drones are just, boy, from when I first saw drones in use in about 2011, 12 to now. So that's State Highway 25. It's quite a flash 3D model that we've got. And that was our own people flew that. So we didn't have to hire some people. We had a couple of our guys that, Sarah and Audi, that had just trained themselves to use drones and produce really good stuff. WSP did this one. It's just a little bit flasher in some ways. In other ways, ours is just as good. But we've mapped and to get quantities and to get measurements and stuff massively accurate. The use of drones has been great, and you don't need to put people anywhere near as much in harm's way. We still have walked all of this, but doing the drone surveys first and then working out where to put people has been hugely helpful. We're still done LiDAR, but yeah, the drones add that bit more detail. And I'm coming to the end. So we're working, actually, I'll just go back to that last one. We're working with TREC. So you asked for an acronym. TREC is the acronym for the Alliance, Transport Rebuild East Coast. Kiral's part of that. We're working with them for taking the information Kiral compiled to now, and we did concepts for it, to now progress that. And how long is this going to take? How much is it going to cost? What are the right solutions for Napier to Wairau? And we're also working with TREC to what's the permanent solution at Awatoto and possibly some of the stuff south. I should emphasise it as a temporary bridge south of Awatoto, because we could get back a year or so quicker by using that. But to get right flood flows to allow for the stop banks, State Highway 51, what's going to change with that? We need to give ourselves, Hawke's Bay Regional Council, Waka Kotahi, time to work on it. On a fun piece, that waterway, that's the boundary between Napier City Council and Hastings District. So we want everyone involved in that one. Yeah, so TREC is doing a massive amount of planning now and to get itself underway. And at the same time, Kiral is doing something called Make Safe. So all of this damage isn't going to last without changing over the winter. The winter that we're in right now and the winter and storms that come in future. And just the context I give for that. This is up in a bit south of Waikowai. So that's taken in February, I think about the 8th of February. Sometime in March that blew out, and there's a few $1 million more of damage because of that. You couldn't get any vehicles, couldn't get forestry gear. Forestry gear was actually trapped further south. They couldn't get out. And so we had no way of stopping that happening. But now we want to stop that happening. We want to stop road and rail bridges getting affected by the debris on them. So we've actually cleared all of this at Munns Creek with Wakakotahi. In places like Esk and it's actually more in Wairoa, getting drainage channels and stuff reopened. Wairoa has been flooded quite badly since the cyclone because things are blocked and things are different up there. I'll just finish with this one because I quite like it. As to a bit of an indication of what occurred. Cyclone Bowler, it washed out State Highway 2, but that connects the north and south banks of the Wairoa town. And so that's why this truss is different. This got converted into a road bridge. And we've got an idea as to where the water came up in Bowler and other events. And it was a reasonable way beneath the truss. The same in the 38 storm. We know where the water came up to, and it's a couple of meters lower. And you can see where it's come up to here because we didn't put all of that there ourselves. Yeah, and I've seen some video someone took the next day when the water was still up, and it's just it's incredible when you see how much water is cutting down these streams. So yeah, planning to get open to Wairoa and actively hoping to be open to Napier soon. Yep, and I think that's it. That's another shot at Estale. So open for questions.
Thanks, Dan. Yes, I'm sure there's lots of questions. Maybe we'll take from the floor here, and then they'll give us time to organise whether we've got questions from the other centres. So anybody here for the question? Here in Wellington, that is.
Dan, for the rectification work you've done to get the line open, what's the balance between just getting it open again and improving resilience, and then looking into the future? What's your view on how much opportunity or need in terms of global warming there is for building more resilience generally, and indeed how much is actually possible against weather events of this magnitude?
Yeah, I'll a couple of things in that question, so remind me if I don't answer everything first go. Yeah, the opening to Hastings was open as quick as you can. Opening to Napier, we called it ugly fast opening after someone's UFO, someone's acronym for some of the Kaikoura work. But that's got a couple of aspects to it. It's ugly because we're not that concerned about some of the appearance pieces to it. We want function over form, I guess. It's fast because we want to be connected. Customers need us to be connected. The roading network has been getting hammered in Hawke's Bay. You drive before State Highway 5 was open, driving State Highway 2 was pretty awful because nothing was going up to Taupo, and so it was pretty long traffic jams and such. And you can just see the pavement damage around Ahuriri and in a few places. So there was a need community-wise to open as quick as you can, and there's a need for this purpose of our rail customers to open as quick as we can. And we're able to open with temporary works with the goal of coming back to reinstate to the extent our insurance covers. So we're insured, and that's a big factor in the scale of work we do. So we do the work up to the level of insurance coverage, which is reinstate to the standards of today, not the standards of 1930. So there's a bit of a difference here. The rebuild with resilience, I think it's actually called Rebuild Smarter rather than or Build Back Smarter versus Build Back Better in some of the stuff I've seen on East Coast. And we are talking with the funders, with government about the potential for resilience works and such. And we have plans and such that we can put in place, but that will be a bit of a funding discussion because the insurance doesn't cover for dealing with things that aren't damaged. Your next piece, I think I recall, was is it possible to rebuild back? Yeah, I mean for Hastings, Napier, Hawke's Bay, it's got to be possible. I'm curious as to what pans out with the Narororo River, the Tutaikuri and such. If you look online, you'll see that there's areas of zoning. The Estale is now zone level 3, which is not able to be inhabited by residents staying overnight. So you can have a rail or a road through there, but you can't have people living there anymore. But there are plenty of places that are in the 2A, B, C categories that it's uncertain, including my mother-in-law's place down at Prongahau, and lots of other people I know. So I've seen a few things of going, you know, there's no point in stop banks and you need to retreat. My question to them would be, where's Taradale going to go? Where is Pakawai going to go? Those places, Puketapu, there's a lot of communities that you go, well, take Wairau and take it where? So they need to adapt, and some of the adaptation's got to have engineering solutions to it, as well as the potential for things like retreat and such in places. And yeah, they've got to be solvable, because Hastings, Taradale, Napier, they've got to still exist.
There's a chat question come through from Auckland, and I think you've probably answered this, but give you the opportunity if there's anything additional you want to answer, and that's, how is the project being funded? And of course, that's a $64 million question, but I suspect it's more than $64 million. So if there's anything more you want to add to that?
Yeah, like I say, reinstatement for damages insurance, and insurance is complicated, as anyone that's ever made claims themselves. We've got good experience on that from Kaikoura earthquake, and so you know we've got a decent understanding of what we can achieve. And then, like I say, for the resilience piece, that's discussions with government, and Waka Kotahi is having the same as to what level of build back better versus just reinstate.
Thank you. And Dean, we think we understand your question, but we're not quite certain about that. So hopefully we have. I don't think we've got any other questions outside Wellington. Is there any other questions from within here? I know it's getting a bit late. I've got one before. I think that just, you know, silt is the enemy of rail. You're just checking something, Dan? Yeah, silt is the enemy of rail, you know, and you've got silt that's contaminated the system. Don't mean it in the bacterial sense, but it's got into the ballast, and then you've got a whole lot of silt sitting upstream ready to come down and then replace what you take away. So is there good technological solutions to deal with that?
There's the potential to use it as bulk fill. It's pretty water sensitive, so that's going to be a massive challenge. It's one that will probably need to get answered in Estale, because we're not going to get rid of 2.5 million cubes of silt from there, so it's going to need to get adapted. Yeah, part of why Hawke's Bay is as it is it's had massive overlays of silt over the years, so it's made it really fertile for growing things. Possibly just not the best for building heavy infrastructure like rail on top of, but it's been done before. Because the ground underneath is in Estale is the ground it always has been, and through some of those other parts, which is your silts and stuff from river flows. But no, I don't have the magic formula of how much lime or such to put in with the silt to get the yet.
Thank you. Is there any other questions from here in Wellington? I think we've confirmed there's none from the other centres. No. If not, right, to thank you, Dan, for a really amazing presentation. I know it is, you know, no matter how many times I've seen some of the photographs, broadly the sheer scale of the damage and the impact of nature upon the meagre works of humankind. So thank you for your time, and thank you everybody for being here. And if we get everybody to thank Dan and the other presenters in the normal way. Thank you. Well, thank you. I'll just move back. I keep forgetting I need to look at the camera. So thank you for everybody attending, those from the other centres, and have a good evening.